Chapter 8. Nikolai didn't need to know all that went on behind the scenes to get him an invite to teach as an adjunct at each of the 3 Romanian military academies. All he knew was that it would look great on his resume, and that when he flipped to a pacifist position, he would have more credibility than ever. That Rika Planchette reported that Nikolai would have to endow a chair at each of the academies hit him as strange. He hadn't been aware of private endowments to government-run institutions, but on the other hand, Planchette had made it clear that these arrangements were to remain off the books. It cost Nikolai only a few million total, a small price, he decided, to secure his future. You are free to attend any classes any time you want at any of the 3 institutions, and you are invited to speak on business and international relations on a schedule that fits your calendar. Excellent work, Rika, Nikolai said, feeling suddenly magnanimous. Surprise registered on Planchette's face. Admittedly, Nikolai's praise of the man was rare. Really, Rika, I appreciate it. Planchette bowed slightly. An honor to serve you, sir. Carpathia studied him. What a passive, cutting victory. To elicit emotion from an older man, a former mentor, with a compliment, that had to hit Planchette like a razor, slicing more deeply, humiliating more effectively than a tongue-lashing, then reminding the man overtly how they had so thoroughly switched roles. Now then, Rika, this Italian you mentioned. Planchette pulled a dossier from his briefcase. Did some background work on him, Nikolai. Quite a pedigree. Do tell. Rika riffled through his stack of papers. An impressive fellow. Varied, eclectic background. Began his education as a religion major. Catholic. Has left the church for some reason. Appears to be a devotee of theosophy. Served in the military with many decorations, always for service to his superiors. Seems to know how to make the man above him look good. You know, the Italian government is a model for ours. 2 houses of a bicameral parliament, the Senato della Repubblica, Senate, and the Camera dei Deputati, Chamber of Deputies. Interesting thing here. Fortunato was elected first to the Senate and served 5 years. Then, despite his popularity, he chose to run for the lower house, the Chamber of Deputies, and served 2 5-year terms there. What do you make of that, Rika? Hard to know. Maybe that servant attitude again. Enjoys elevating others for some reason. Strange. Since then, the man has begun his own business, traveled the world consulting with and advising heads of states, trained politicos, coached political parties, taught diplomacy, protocol, and, where allowed, something he calls religious sensibilities. I would love to meet him, get a handle on my teaching role. Set it up, would you, Rika? Rayford began to dread coming home. Oh, the kids were fine, if a little bothersome. Chloe, 12, was so much like Rayford he found it scary. She didn't miss a thing, and he often overheard her using the same arguments with her mother that Rayford used. She was smart and articulate, loved science, and was a show-me person. If you couldn't prove it, you'd better not get into it with her. Rayford could tell that Irene was, of course, worried about Chloe's soul. She needn't be, he decided. Chloe was no worse than anyone else and better than most. Oh, she could be kinder to her 4-year-old brother, who naturally loved everything having to do with Sunday school and church. That was another thing. Now that Raimi had to go not just to church, but also to Sunday school, they all had to go. Rayford and Chloe fought it tooth and nail, and often the family arrived at church red-faced and not speaking, yet pasting on their Sunday smiles. Rayford had failed to talk the higher-ups into any semblance of fisherman's mass, so every other Sunday or so resulted in yet another go-round with Irene about whether he went to church and Sunday school or played golf. He was tired of losing that battle, and the day would come soon when he would confront her about it. Rayford was tired of the teasing from the rest of his foursome. He didn't find it funny to be accused of being henpecked, or worse, whipped. The fact was, his commitment to church had been made to God, not to Irene, and he was going to stop being parented over it. He could worship God just as well in nature as he could in some cold, hard pew, probably better. Most of all, this was his life, and he was going to do as he pleased. He didn't tell Irene what to do, and he'd be hanged if he was going to let her tell him what to do. There was no one else in his life, and he had never considered divorce. But when he imagined the confrontation with Irene, he had to play it out to its potential conclusion. If they came to loggerheads, what were his options? Would he leave her? Could he? He didn't want to. But he didn't want to live this way either. And while he had not been on the prowl, there were other fish in the sea. Rayford wasn't blind to the way women looked at him, looked up to him, talked to him, smiled at him. He had colleagues who had taken advantage of almost every member of their flight crews. He didn't doubt he could do the same if he was of a mind to. But that wasn't the point. He just needed a little shift in the balance of power at home. Not only did he want to do what he wanted to do, but as the sole breadwinner, he also felt entitled to his own time, and he was finished being made to feel small over it. How could so many things be going right in her life while her marriage seemed to be stagnating? Irene prayed for Rayford every day, mostly for his salvation. But lately she had been pleading with God for patience and understanding. She and Rayford had become strangers, awkward alien beings who seemed to spin in separate orbits. They weren't even united about the kids. Irene kept a tight rein on Chloe and Raimi, though Raimi didn't need much. Chloe tested her mother, mostly verbally, seemingly all the time. Everything had to be explained or defended, or Irene could be made to feel like the most ignorant woman on the planet. Rayford, on the other hand, was largely disengaged from the kids. When he was home, he wanted them quiet. He spent a little time with them and was good with them when he did, but usually he begged off after half an hour or so. Irene began mustering her courage and making a list for a confrontation. It wasn't working this way. Leonardo Fortunato accepted Nikolai's invitation, through Rika Planchette, of course, for a late dinner on a Thursday night with Nikolai's Aunt Viv and Rika at the estate. This time Nikolai selected the black Bentley to pick up the guest, who was to be delivered to the front door at 10 p.m. It was arranged that Rika and Viv would wait in the parlor and summon Nikolai when Fortunato arrived. By the time Nikolai came down from his study, wearing his most sedate and understated classy dinner jacket, Rika had introduced Mr. Fortunato and Ms. Ivins. Fortunato, please call me Leon, was very dark and stocky, wearing a tailored but not expensive suit and tie. He reminded Nikolai of a bodyguard in a bad movie. He looked older than his years, though his hair remained thick and black. Perhaps it was because of his jowls. His black eyes carried a world-weariness, but Nikolai thought he detected shyness as well, despite the man's varied background. Fortunato presented Nikolai with an expensive bottle of Italian wine, insisting that he enjoy it himself at another time. "No doubt you have already selected one for tonight." "More than one, actually," Nikolai said, thanking him. The four sat to a formal meal at a small square table, Fortunato immediately apologizing for not speaking Romanian. "That has made it difficult to teach here, but I do my best." "Well," Nikolai said, It happens that Italian is not one of my mastered languages, so let us choose, say, English, and see if we can make that work, shall we?" As the staff served, Fortunato stage-whispered to Planchette, "How many languages has he mastered?" "9. 9, my heavens!" "And enough of them," Nikolai said, "are close enough to Italian that I could do the best I can." "English is fine," Leon said. "And what have we here?" "Oh, just a little delicatezza, some fruit." "A delicacy of fruit? See, you speak Italian, English, and Romanian." They spent a long while enjoying a multi-course meal. Then Nikolai excused Viv and Rika and ushered Mr. Fortunato into a screened-in anteroom that looked out over the mountains. A fireplace roared. Nikolai had Cuban cigars delivered. "Do me the honor of selecting that one," he said, pointing to one of the thickest in the humidor. "Gladly," Fortunato said. Nikolai chose a duplicate. He snipped the ends and lit both cigars. After a long, slow pull, Fortunato seemed to savor it before slowly exhaling. "I can die now," he said, chuckling. "Thank you for a wonderful evening. You have a beautiful place, everything perfect. Oh, the night is young, do you not agree?" Fortunato shrugged and smiled, as if up for anything. "I thought we might talk at length," Nikolai said, "but I would not want to be a rude host." "I have all the time you need, sir," Leon said. Rayford didn't know what to think when Irene informed him of her plan for the next time he returned from a long trip. She had arranged for Jackie to take the kids, and she had booked a room at the local hotel. That was not new, but when she had done it before, it had been either Valentine's Day, their anniversary, or Rayford's birthday. This time there was no special occasion. During his flying and idle time, Rayford tried to come to some conclusion about what this was all about. While their love life of late left something to be desired, it had not been all that bad. She was tired, stressed, overworked. He was distant, not entirely happy, clearly with something unresolved on his mind. Maybe it was a test. Maybe she was going to ask him if he had remained faithful. For that, he was grateful. He didn't need real guilt to top what she had already tried to induce in him with her looks, body language, and comments about his parenting, his responsibility to his parents, and his fast deteriorating Sunday commitments. Rayford decided to take his list with him. Maybe it wasn't fair to ambush her, to spring a confrontation on her when this was a party she had planned. There was obviously something on her mind. He would enjoy putting her at ease, but at some point, if the timing and atmosphere were right, he was going to haul out that list. That she had planned this at a hotel, plainly with romance as part of the milieu, meant she was not totally on the warpath. He wouldn't be either. But it was time to be honest. He would be clear with her that he had not strayed, but also that he had good reasons for the emotional distance he had allowed between them. The fact was, this was as much or more her fault than his, and she was going to have to face that and deal with it. "I'll have a bag packed for you, hon," she had said. "You don't even need to get out of the car unless you want to. I'll be ready to go, and we can head straight for the hotel as soon as you pull into the drive. How's that sound?" "Suspicious," he said. "I'm sure glad you said that with a smile," she said. "There can't be anything wrong with a woman wanting to seduce her husband, can there?" "I'll rack my brain," he said.